friends, and thanks for joining us here again today on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale. And as always, sitting to my immediate right, the man behind the panel with all the buttons, Mr. Philio Filson.
How's it going, everybody? I had a really good Halloween. Cam, check out this thing. It's blocking my face. We got these new...
It's good. I'm glad it's blocking that face.
Thank you for that.
I can still see the glare off that dome, though.
Oh, yeah. All right, come on. Keep the insults coming. Let's get them out of the way. Go ahead. Boost my self-esteem.
I put Rogaine in his bag, folks, for Halloween. He came by, trick or treat. I go, here's your treat.
Anyways, I got this thing blocking me, and you have one too, but it may not be causing you the same problem as me. I'm not used to it. We got these new things. They're called microphone flags. If you ever watch like a on-the-scene report or anything where they're holding up the microphone, it has like a little square box with like the news station on there, say like Fox 4.
Don't tell them why. We'll tell them at the end of the show.
No, I know. I'm just saying, but we got some new ones, that Expanded Perspectives ones, and they're stuck right up here above my microphone. And it's not that it's a problem. It's just I've never had one here till now.
It feels weird, doesn't it?
It's like I feel like it's really blocking me, but it really isn't. It's just a nuisance. I mean, the thing's only like 3 inches big. Yeah. But for some reason,
she said.
It keeps drawing my attention. I keep like trying to read around it. I'm like, man, this thing is really bothering me.
That's funny.
But you got to get used to it, especially when you're a professional. So
whatever.
What does that have to make do, right? What's going on in your world?
Oh, not much. Just survived Halloween. Hope everybody that celebrates had a wonderful time. Hope everybody got home safe. Hope y'all had some really good, I guess, visitors. If you didn't see, that was the cool thing with us is my children are older, so we don't have to kind of go around and go through all the rigmarole of doing it ourselves. So we just get to go and hand out candy, and that was pretty fun. I really enjoyed that part of it, to really get to go and just went over to some friends of ours and sat and just saw the kids, and it was really a blast.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, let's get into some news. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do this.
Did you see this? According to a study published in the journal Nature Communications, researchers at the University of Bristol and Public University of Navarre created a sonic tractor beam that uses high-amplitude sound waves to levitate, move, and rotate small objects.
That's going to be awesome.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
In other words, they use sound waves formed in a 3D auroral tweezers, basically, to pick up this ball.
What?
They use sound waves formed into 3D auroral tweezers.
Don't say that fast.
Right, to pick up the ball. And they use a vortex to levitate it in a box to carry it around in. Now, they say, unfortunately, this tractor beam will not work in outer space.
Oh.
They say space is void, and therefore sound cannot travel in it.
Who cares? It's more fun here anyway. I don't want a tractor beam rocks up there. I don't give a damn. I want to move stuff here.
Right, its primary uses will probably be inside the space station where there's atmosphere, or in the medical field where it can be used to manipulate things like, say, internal kidney stones without actually having to make an incision. They can just use a tractor beam to move it out the way they want.
How about it works in my living room so I can hit a button and tractor beam beer down from my fridge down into to where I'm
Well, they're working on that. Now, in addition to the tractor beam that they've created, they're actually, scientists at MIT have developed a way to use Wi-Fi signals to see and identify people through walls. Now, they call this technology RF capture, and it involves capturing Wi-Fi signals bounced off of the human body and then reassembling them into a unique silhouette fingerprint that allowed them to correctly identify a person on the other side of the wall 90% of the time. Now, everybody uses Wi-Fi nowadays. It's invisible. It goes through stuff just like your phone and everything else. But they figured out a way where they can bounce that off of you and then develop an image.
That's awesome.
So it doesn't look clear like looking through a window, but it does look like the silhouette of your body. So I could see you on the other side of that wall by using the Wi-Fi signals, because I guess somehow it's obscured and it makes the
military will have that in a scope before long, mounted on the back of like a robotic Jaguar.
Exactly. Now they're envisioning to use this technology in what they're going to call smart houses. And if, say, like an elderly person falls down, they could see through the wall and see that they've fallen down. Things like that. That's what they say.
BS to me.
Right. I think it's going to be another way to another form of surveillance they can use.
Yes.
Anyways, pretty cool.
I got something that's pretty cool because I know how much you love this. Now, get out your pens, folks. Kyle, get out your notepad.
I got it here.
Testimony case 71217 from the MUFON Witness Database. A Delaware motorist encounters a hovering UFO. Now, this comes from Roger Marsh, our amigo over there at openminds.tv. Now, there was a Delaware witness in Sandtown reported a low-flying. Now, here we go. We've talked about the shapes. This is a low-flying, boomerang-shaped UFO that gave off a humming sound. The witness was returning home from work at approximately 9:50 p.m. on August 9th, 2015, when low lights were seen just above the roadway.
It's my birthday, folks,
right?
August 9th.
Right, it's probably you doing this. It says it was just hovering there. I got out of the truck and noticed the boomerang-shaped object with lights on the side of this craft. The lights were white, bright, and steady. The object began to move. He says, it began to move slowly in the direction towards Felton and Harrington, Delaware, which I estimate to be southeast. I then noticed, as it moved slowly, that it had a humming, swishing sound. Now, the witness's wife heard a different sound. It says, upon telling my wife, she described hearing the humming, pulsing sound, and she was about a mile away. Said, I've never seen anything like this other than a handheld boomerang. Says it was with my father-in-law, who also witnessed the lights and the object, and said that he's never witnessed anything like that before. Now, this is in Kent County there in Delaware. To me, that's awesome, yet again, because now they're making sound. So it's almost, I don't know why I equate sound with, like, man-made objects. Just, you know what I mean? I don't know why I'm like, well, if you could fly that here, then it's got to be something made here. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? If you're flying across space, I just don't why I always think it's got to be quiet.
Is it possible? Is it possible that it could have been a drone? The reason I bring this up is just last night I was talking before the show. A friend of mine just purchased a drone, and we were actually playing with it last night. And it's pretty awesome. It films in 4K.
I didn't get to see it. He sent me pictures of it when he got it. It's awesome.
When it's flying above you, it sounds like a loud humming sound. The props, all four, and it's got funky lights on it. And that's exactly what I said. I said this last night. We were up there flying it around. I said, if you were a person to walk out your balcony and you saw that and you took a picture, it would look like all these hundreds of thousands of extra UFO pictures that you see. And that's what it looks like.
And if you didn't know how far,
the shape.
you can't tell the distance, so it's smaller, so it looks like it's further away.
Exactly. So when they talk about the sighting and the humming sound, could it be a drone? I mean, there are literally thousands of drones out there.
Let me ask you this.
Hobbyists are building them, weekly.
On what you saw there, could you build one just where the lights, where you couldn't see the props or the rotors on it, you just saw the lights, and the lights made you believe it was boomerang shaped?
Yeah, well, the props are spinning so fast you can't see them.
What you know what I mean is you can see the housings on things. If it was dark enough, could you make it look like a boomerang and never see that?
They actually make drones that look like UFOs.
That ain't good.
And you can fly them around. I'm telling you, if
talk about muddy in the water. Here we go.
That's exactly right. It'll look like a UFO.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, pretty cool. Speaking of flying, did you see this? They've invented a robotic bee that can fly and swim. They say that the first insect-like robot that can both fly and swim has been creating a buzz of excitement in the robotics field. Now, the Robo-Bee, which is the brainchild of engineers at Harvard, John
we talked about this a while back.
Paulson School.
But now they've got it swimming?
Now they've got it swimming. It's about the size of a paperclip. And they said they can teach it to cut off power and go under, and they can manipulate basically the way the wings move for flight.
That's awesome.
They just altered a little bit, and now it swims. Now, they say to make this robot swim, engineers looked at sea birds, specifically the puffin, for inspiration. The engineers used theoretical, computational, and experimental studies to identify that the only major difference between a puffin's flying and swimming is the speed at which the wings move. So once they followed up to the puffin, they used it with this robotic bee. So now the Robo-Bee can not only fly, but it can swim. And they've invented a robo-cockroach that can squeeze through these little areas. I mean, it truly is going to be a bunch of nanobots that you can release.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time, if they can figure out how to get cameras small enough, I mean, you're going to be able to have like robo-ticks. They can just hitch a ride on a dog, then jump off at your house, right?
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Spying on you.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. Anyways, thought that was interesting.
Well, and we had discussed it because they were going to use them to pollinate massive fields, to be where you could just open them up.
Right,
the Robo-Bees come out and pollinate and come back. So it's neat that they're still sticking with it. I like the follow-ups. I love it when we know, they're still working towards that. That's pretty awesome.
Pretty cool. Well, let's take a break. And after the break, we're going to get into this Missouri's mystery weapon. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. In the summer of 1952, some boys playing down by a riverbank in northern Missouri noticed a large, peculiar shape in the water. They had no clue as to what it could be. Whatever it was, it seemed stuck into the ground, and they were unable to extract it. Word soon spread of the discovery among the townspeople. A local businessman, who was a dealer in scrap iron, decided that he would assist the young boys and help them recover whatever they had found buried in the ground. He used a powerful motor winch to drag the lads' find out into the open. It turned out to be a large grindstone. That was all. But clinging to its underside was an unusual conglomeration of bluish mud with the merest suggestion of something else slightly visible trapped inside. William Krebs, who was the man with the winch, scraped off the amorphous accretion and carried it home. Once home, William planned to do some more investigating and to try to remove the mud to see if there might, just might, be something else there. As with most things in life, the process proved to be much more difficult than he originally anticipated. But he was dedicated and somehow knew there was something else not yet discovered. Scrubbing off the river slime, Krebs encountered an apparently much older substance that had assumed the hardness of calcified shells. Hoping to remove the strange object without damaging it, he steeped the whole mess in a bath of cleaning solution for half a year. It took him another month to carefully wash away the last remnants of clinging material with penetrating oil. What finally emerged was one of the most baffling finds ever discovered in North America. It was a weapon. The most unusual weapon he or anyone else in Missouri had ever seen. Slowly, withdrawing it from the curved sheath, he was surprised to see not one, but 3 blades emerge. The peculiar triple threat measured 14 inches from the point of its center blade, the largest, to the extreme end of its handle. Krebs examined the weapon's fine workmanship. It was alien to anything comparable he knew of. Not only was the shape of the curved blade unusual, the markings on the blade were different from anything Krebs had ever seen. It was decorated with somewhat faded, although clearly discernible images of strangely dressed women, accompanied with other human figures wearing bizarre headdresses. Seated, or possibly dancing in a garden inhabited by mythical birds, the women appeared to be signaling one another with meaningful hand gestures of some kind. All the images seemed to have been engraved by some non-mechanical method. Looking at the dagger point on, Krebs noticed that its only non-metallic component was a piece of bone, nicely cut and inserted at the front of the pommel, where the blade trio was connected at its base. He knew that he needed someone with more knowledge to look at the incredible artifact, someone who might possibly know of its origins. He took his find to the Missouri State Archaeologist, who typically declared at first glance that such a knife could only be a modern fake of some kind, but offered to take the find anyway. Krebs didn't get a good feeling from his visit with the state archaeologist. He sensed dishonesty and decided against giving an item away. So he left and returned home with his artifact. He continued to show anyone he could the artifact in hopes of finding someone who could tell him more about the find. Over the next quarter century, he found no one who could identify it until he met a man named David McEwen, a Utah metallurgist with 35 years of experience. This is what Krebs had been seeking, someone with both knowledge and experience, someone that could verify that this object was not a modern fake made to look old, but was in fact an ancient weapon left here by some stranger from a foreign land. It was definitely not Native American. McEwen determined that the unusual weapon had been manufactured by heating its steel to very high temperatures, then pounding it with a wooden mallet. and then dousing it in water. A process repeated over and over until the desired shape and resilient strength were obtained. McEwen pointed out that such a primitive manufacturing process was no longer used anywhere in the world, but had been common throughout Europe and Asia up into the Middle Ages. Underscoring its late Dark Age foraging process, his analysis showed that the Missouri knife was 1,000 to 1,200 years old. He was able to determine that its mineral composition is 3% copper, but the mine from which such metal was excavated is unknown. McEwen believes, however, that the object came from India, possibly sometime in the 9th or 11th centuries. He found that triple-bladed weapons were used throughout the subcontinent in medieval times, when headdresses similar to those depicted on the scabbard of Mr. Krebs' discovery were also in fashion. Moreover, hand gestures made by the daggers incised female figures could be mudras. Mudras are a series of subtle hand movements employed by India's classical dancers to express specific emotions. The test seemed to confirm that the weapon is, in fact, authentic. What an incredible find. Now some people claim that it is in fact an ancient blade from India, but that it was not left by an Indian explorer in the Americas, but that a modern-day weapons collector must have accidentally dropped it in the river. Now, this idea seems very far-fetched. To me, it is a clear indication of clear evidence for the arrival of seafarers from India 1,000 or more years ago. These transoceanic visitors may have traveled far inland, but more likely, they landed on the Pacific coast, where Native Americans somehow obtained the knife and in their wanderings lost it in the Midwest. In American Discovery, The Real Story by Dr. Gunnar Thompson, he wrote, Hindu geographers identified lands across the Pacific on the other side of the earth. The lands were known as Pantala, which is variously translated as the opposite land, or the land of gold. And on the same page, he reproduces a 7th century Tibetan map, actually indicating the location of Pantala across the Pacific. Among the abundant evidence on behalf of influencers of India in America, Dr. Thompson cites the singular eye in the hand religious motif found in India, and appropriately the Mississippi Valley around 1200 AD. This and all the other information may actually be the physical proof confirming the arrival in prehistoric America of sailors from medieval India. So a very interesting case. What do you think?
I love it. I love whenever they talk about finding anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, now look at the pictures of this knife. I mean, it's a 3-bladed, like curved, you know, they call it a dagger. I wouldn't really call it a sword. You know, it looks like, you know, almost 2 foot long. I guess it would be a large dagger. But, I mean, it looks just like the ones from India at that time. I don't think there's any argument that that's what it is. I like the fact that they claim that that it is, once they, okay, at first when they was first presented, everybody was like, it's not real, it's fake.
Yeah, it's not real, yeah.
It's made to look like an older sword. But then when a metallurgist just looks at it, he's like, no, I can tell this was hand forged.
It's a real one. This is the one.
It's got the right patina on it. It's got everything on it. I can tell by looking at the folds, you know, even under like an electronic microscope. You can see the folds when, you know, how many times they fold the metal when they're producing such a blade. He authenticates the thing as being the right date, the right style.
But,
so once they know it's real, then they switch to, okay, it's real. We can't argue that. It must have been like a weapons collector that I guess was fishing down there and then dropped it in the mud. I mean,
yeah, he's carrying it around with him. He's got this and he's toting it around with him, and he's so irresponsible. He's like, Butterfingers, and he just knocks it off into the water.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, come on. Does that seem likely?
No,
to you?
It doesn't. No. And there's a reason, because that's not what happened.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more.
I love the fact that that's how they try to throw this out to everybody. And they always have. And we always talk about they. You know, it always seems like, of course, it's the academic side of it. It's funny that if First of all, it's never, oh, well, it's real. Let's take a closer look at that. Where did this come from? How did it get there? It's instantly, they write that part off, because if it doesn't fit in their box, they don't even want to look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what they do all the time. They constantly say, well, no, it's got to be faked. And then once it's proven, then they're like, oh, okay, well, it couldn't have arrived, by an actual man from India.
It's aggravating. It really, really is extremely aggravating that I wouldn't say that there's an overabundant amount of proof of all of this, but there's enough here that you should look into it.
I agree.
There's enough there to make you go, you know what? It pretty much tells the story of what was going on, and they just don't do it.
Well, and it was really hard to get out of the ground. He had to soak it. He steeped it in some chemical for a year.
Well, it just makes me think about the lead artifacts. It's the same thing. They're finding these things, but nobody. It just seems to be like they just scoff it off. They're just like, nah. Some collector dropped it. Oh, yeah. Just, if you notice, I don't know if anybody, anytime you're on any sort of public transit system, there's always priceless baseball cards laying around and comic books and rings and watches, because collectors just lazily leave them laying about. Right. That's exactly what happens.
Right, exactly. And I'm not saying it may not have actually been an Indian person that had lost it. Maybe it was traded, some kind of trade from India to the Pacific coast, and maybe, then it was a guy passed around for a while, and somebody eventually did drop it or was killed or something. But it's definitely a weapon from India from that time period, 1,200 years old. It's been there a long time.
Yes,
way before Columbus was here. Yes. So how do you write that off? And another thing, it's not the only case. There's been other cases of found weapons here in the United States. Check this one out. In July 2014, an avocational surface collector chanced across a partially exposed Chinese votive sword behind roots in an eroded bank in a small stream in Georgia. The 30-centimeter artifact is possibly a one-of-a-kind find in North America and is another example in the growing list of seemingly out-of-place Chinese artifacts, suggesting Chinese travels to North America in pre-Columbian times. Now, this exquisite sword has preliminarily been identified as being fashioned in the lizardite and has a surface feature indicating that it's very old. It is hoped that future testing will confirm the type of stone and determine the source. Now, lizardite deposits exist both in eastern and western hemispheres, so answers to when, who, and how questions remain uncertain. Now, recently, an attempt to determine when the soil at the extraction site was last exposed to sunlight was thwarted because it was determined that the soil had been disturbed and they weren't able to date the thing. But what they do know is that the symbols and stuff that are on this sword are from the Shang or Zhao dynasties, they believe. And if that's the case, then that is 1600 to 1046 BC. So, it's an old Chinese sword that they found buried in the dirt in Georgia.
Obviously, somebody in Georgia is a horrible collector at keeping up with their things.
He must have been fishing again.
It's the same guy.
I brought my ancient Chinese sword with me.
Same guy.
Yep.
He fishes. He's like, man, I can't carry a pair of nail clippers or a line cutter's ring in order to cut my fishing line. I just have to carry an ancient antique sword with me. And, Butterfingers, I dropped it again.
Right. So, like you were pointing out, if you have a priceless heirloom, nobody's going to take it and just wander around with it.
Just
and you're definitely not going to forget that you dropped it.
Yeah. Oh, shucks. I did it again.
I dropped another one. Sword, right?
Always dropping those. I'm terrible at that. I don't mind spending $60,000 to $80,000 a piece on them. That's no big deal. But dropping them, that stuff really gets boring. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, and this is, again, there's numerous other artifacts that have been found that talk about the Chinese being in America before Columbus. We've talked about it in older episodes of Expanded Perspectives, where one of the rulers, he sent out a large fleet of people to come to America. And it's well known, that we talk about it all the time, that people had maps of America. They knew where to go. They were trading with people either in South America and Ecuador. There was massive trades. Now, check this one out. There was another weapon found, a mound in Belmont County in the state of Ohio, opposite the mouth of the Little Grave Creek and nearly a half mile from the Ohio River. They discovered near the bottom, they found several layers of human bones laid transversely in a great mass or decayed matter, 5 or 6 feet thick. The toe and fingernails were nearly entire. And they said that the hair was dark brown in color. And they, along with flint spears, they found 4 or 5 iron swords. Now, they said that these silver ferrules on the handguards were engraved with animals and geometrical figures. So here again in the state of Ohio, they find this grave filled with skeletons, and in it 4 or 5 swords. So, as far as we know, Native Americans didn't use swords. They didn't have metallurgy. They didn't use swords. So if you find a sword, an ancient sword in North America, it was not Native American. They weren't using them.
Exactly.
It has to be from Asia or Europe.
Or, yeah.
So were these Nordic swords? It doesn't really say. I don't know if they can tell. Yeah. But it does sound like it. I mean, geometric figures and animals, we've talked about that before. I think even exclusively on an episode about the Ulfbert sword, how, they would use bones of their dead ancestors to forge into blades, and they would also pick like an animal, like that's their family crest on, the wolves or a bear or something like that. So, it sounds to me like these are probably Viking swords.
Very possible.
And we know from other artifacts like the Kensington runestone and things like that, that it appears that Norse people were here in this country. So, you're never told these things in school, that all these weapons are found here, whether it's Chinese, Norse, or even Indian, but yet they're here. So how many other things are there laying just kind of undisturbed that, no one ever talks about or no one even knows exist, but are there?
Well, how many have been found and discarded or gotten rid of? That's what always makes me wonder.
You're right.
Is, how many of these things have been found and nobody says, they just like he said, he didn't get a good feeling about the state archaeologist when he had that, and with the India sword. So you're like, how many of that has happened in the past where people have made that mistake, turned it over, it's boxed up, it goes to the Smithsonian, and magically it vanishes, never to be seen again?
Yeah. I remember I took a trip when I was younger, and we were somewhere in, I want to say, Virginia, and I remember it was a friend of my family's. I don't know who it was, but we were at his house, and I was in his house, and I was young, and I remember looking, like one of the rooms had a fireplace and like a hearth and things, and up there above it, he had several long-looking rifles, old, long rifles, and I remember asking, like, wow, those are pretty cool. What are those? They were apparently Civil War rifles that the landowner had found just scattered around on his property. Like somebody had been shot and dropped them, and there they were buried. He was plowing his field, and he
popped them up.
So, even that, isn't very old as far as a Civil War rifle. But say that man, who's probably dead now, hands that down to his son, and then his son hands it down to his son, and hands it down, and so many generations. He doesn't go to the Smithsonian or anybody to let them know that he has these rifles. So you're right. Could somebody have found an ancient dagger or something? They just kept it as a family heirloom. Nobody ever tells anybody about it. They never sell it. They never report it. They just kind of keep it. It's an artifact. It's a neat find. I have arrowheads that I've found throughout my life in my room in a little drawer. I don't report it.
Yeah.
I could have like a Clovis culture unknown broadhead or something that somebody's looking for it, and I don't know that I have it.
Yeah.
I think that kind of thing could happen.
I think it very easily could happen. I think it has.
I think it has too. Not just weapons. There's pennies and coins. We talk about the Roman coins and things like that. There's just all types of things that are unearthed, and I love to contemplate and to think about these things and the cultures that we're here, and especially the weapons. To me, I love the weapons. Now, Mr. Krebs, the one I was reading the story about, the Missouri weapon, they're not done looking into this thing. In fact, if he puts it out there that he's still looking for anybody that can shed further light on this discovery. And if you know anybody, he gives his address, he gives his phone number, he gives his email. So if you are somebody out there who hears this and thinks if you have some expertise and would like to shed some light, you can actually contact Mr. Krebs and you could work with him and maybe help him discover this.
I guess the thing that always I think about this, and I kind of understand, I was thinking about it when you were talking about, he's looking for more help, and it always seems like when you get an archaeologist or you get someone involved that is more along the lines of an academic way or a structured way of thinking, not thinking outside the box of a possibility of that kind of interaction, is when you get the people that they're like, well, where did it come from? Because unless they see it in the ground, to them it's just a hoax, unless they are the ones that found it, which is kind of aggravating, because that would be like reporting a crime, but the police not believing you because they weren't there to see it.
You're right.
That's kind of what that's like. So instantly they go in there, instead of an open mind, it's already, well, if you didn't leave it in the ground for me to uncover, then it's not real because you didn't know what you did. You know, or I can't prove that you did that, you know, and it doesn't stand up in other points of life. I don't know why it does here. That's very, very strange to me. I understand that hoaxes have gotten through and made fools out of people, but also, I mean, and maybe that's all it really is. It doesn't seem that way, though. And also, too, given the track record of most, like we discussed, of people taking them, shipping them off to be, in air quotes, checked out or tested, and then vanishing because they don't fit the criteria of what we've been taught all these years, you kind of don't want to turn it over to anybody else either. You know, you're like, there it is. It's almost like we've discussed before that you're going to have a video. When it pops out of the ground, there needs to be video running, and people are like, oh, what is that? Yeah. And then it show them on footage. You know what I mean? It's got to be something like that nowadays. I don't know, man. It bums me out because I wish that there was more work being done in these fields, because I think it would tell a much more interesting story.
Well, that's how they keep finding these swords in these creek beds, is when they turn them in, those guys go out there and just throw them out in the woods, and then somebody else finds them another 50 years later, right?
He just drives by and throws it out of the back of the truck. Hell, we don't need that anymore.
Right. Well, very interesting. I'm glad we were able to talk about it today.
Well, man, I really appreciate you doing it. And what's funny about you doing this, and you talking about, you know, finding things and stuff like that, is this is one of those ones that me and Kyle didn't discuss what we were going to be doing today at all. And then this comes up. It's funny how it almost seems to mesh, because I was like, I'm going to do some history also. But it's a little bit different history. And I want to bring this to light for you, Philly, because of it being November. And this is kind of when it all kicks off. If I was to ask you the name, if you know the name Howard Carter, would you remember that name for any reason?
No, I have no idea who Howard Carter is.
Most people don't. Most people really, it's one of those things they know when you say where it comes from. But when you bring it up, they don't really remember any of it. Howard Carter was the English archaeologist and Egyptologist who actually became famous for discovering King Tut's tomb.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I should know that, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's one of the, but
I feel bad that I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the reason I bring it up is because November 4th of 1922 was when it was discovered.
Oh, wow.
So this week, 93 years ago, this week was when it was brought into light, I guess you could say, of them wanting this whole thing. So I'm going to talk about not just that, but the fact that there was the curse of the Pharaoh that came along with the finding of that tomb.
There really was a curse.
Well, we're going to get into that.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
I like this, yeah.
Now, this, like we're talking about, this was a while back now, folks. So we're talking 1891. That's whenever Howard, Mr. Carter, first arrived in Egypt. And at the time, most of the ancient Egyptian tombs had already been discovered. Though there was a very little-known king there of Tutankhamun. All right? And he had lived around 1400 BC, and he had actually died when he was 18 years old. And it was all unaccounted for. They had this in the records of it, but they had not found all this. Now, because the ancient Egyptians basically believed that their pharaohs were gods here on earth, we all know that they went through very careful preservation of their bodies after death. You know, they put them in the tombs, they packed them full of riches. So they wanted to make sure that they had all these treasures to accompany them in the afterlife. So, of course, in the 19th century, whenever it started getting popular to be an archaeologist at the time, is when everybody started just swarming to Egypt because they wanted to uncover all of these tombs. And that's when that seems to be like the heyday of it, was when it just really busted into it and everybody. But many before that had been actually broken into, and grave robbers had taken it, you know, when they'd been found, like we'd always discussed, you know, maybe somebody had stumbled upon one and told some friends about it, and his friends told some friends, and then their friends decided to break into it and take some stuff. You know, things like this has happened. So after World War I, Mr. Carter began a very extensive search in the areas there for King Tut's tomb. Now, he was backed by a wealthy Englishman, Lord Carnarvon. Now, Carter searched for 5 years with no success. Now, you got to imagine what kind of dedication that would take, is just heartbreak after heartbreak of not finding anything like for 5 years. But it was early in the year of 1922, Lord Carnarvon wanted to call it off. He was like, look, I'm tired of dumping money into this, man.
Yeah.
We're getting nothing out of it. Carter said, look, give me one more year. Give me just, one more year. And then after that, if I can't seem to pull it off, that'll be it. So, like I said before, finally, now on November 4th of 1922, the wait, the up all night studying and researching, all the hard work, it paid off. Carter and some of his team found some steps that was hidden in some debris near the entrance to another tomb, actually. And it's not just any tomb. It was the entrance of the tomb of King Ramses VI in the Valley of the Kings. Now, these mysterious little steps they found led to an ancient sealed doorway, folks. And there inscribed on this newly found entrance was the name Tutankhamun. You could only imagine what that must have been like.
Right.
5 years, breaking your back, up all night. I mean, just, you got to think, just worrying away, knowing the plug is about to be pulled on your little expedition if you can't make it. This is November now. You know, you're running out of time, and there it is. You can only imagine how ecstatic it must have been. But this is another reason I enjoy it. On November 26th, my birthday in 1922, Carter, along with fellow archaeologist and his good friend and his backer, Lord Carnarvon, entered the interior chambers of that tomb. And the wild thing was, miraculously, the entire thing was intact still. It had never been found, even by grave robbers, what they had figured.
Yeah, I remember seeing actual photographs of the door was tied.
Yes.
And they still have that photograph. It's really neat to see it. I'm glad somebody took that snapshot because it really is
fascinating.
It's a snapshot in time. I mean, that is literally the way it looked. It had looked just like that when they put him in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it had been more than 3,000 years and nothing had been touched.
Yeah.
Just laid there.
How creepy must that have been to, undo that and for the first time go in there and just see it
with the old school torches that they had.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been neat?
I would have loved it.
I would have loved to have been an archaeologist during that time.
Yes.
Not that I wouldn't mind doing it now.
Oh, yeah. But just back then was the heyday, or even before that, like I just discussed. Before that would have been the heyday of it. Now, of course, all the men began exploring the 4 rooms of the tomb. And on February 16th of 23, there were several officials there. Carter opened the door to the last chamber of that whole tomb. And some believe that he sealed the fate to all the people that came in contact after this. Now, Carter, in his own notes, and there's some photographic evidence there to indicate that he, Lord Carnarvon, and Lady Eleven Herbert had actually entered the burial chamber shortly after the tomb had been discovered and before there was ever an official opening. And I can understand why.
Yeah.
It'd be one of those things, if you was to find something, you and I or any of us, you go in there, you're like, look, I know there's going to be an official opening, we'll play it up, but I've got to see it for myself. I've just spent 5 years, no telling how much Carnarvon money that they had gone through. There's no telling. You're like, look, we're going to get the first peek. I'm going to get the first bite of ice cream. Y'all can have what's after that, but I'm trying it first.
Yeah, I can see that.
So inside, I was like, man, could you imagine like what you were talking about? Inside this place, there's a sarcophagus, all right, with 3 coffins that was kind of inside, one inside of another. The last coffin in that sarcophagus was made of solid gold.
Wow.
That is what contained the body of King Tut, the little mummified body. Now, they said among the riches that was found in this tomb, there was jewelry, statues, golden shrines, perfectly preserved clothing, a chariot, and weapons. And, of course, the mummy. And it was the first one ever to be basically discovered. It was the most valuable. So I'm sure that, and look, despite there was a lot of rumors, okay, that they would be, anyone who had disturbed the tomb, all right, was going to get this curse. But all the treasure was, they cataloged it. You can imagine how long it sat there. They cataloged it. They removed every bit of it. They actually had it in a traveling expedition. It was called the Treasures of Tutankhamun. Now, there's a permanent house for this, and it's in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. That's where all the treasures from Tutankhamun are at now that they've cataloged and took out. And I remember that coming to the art museum, the Museum of Science and History in DFW, and I remember going over there as a young child to actually get to go see some of these things.
Yeah, I saw the Ramses exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty cool.
This isn't where the story ends. There's some really strange parts to this story. The story goes like this, that when Carter arrived home that night after finding the tomb and all this stuff, that his servant met him at the door, and that in the servant's hand he held some yellow feathers. And apparently he had a canary. Carter had a pet canary. And the servant reported that the canary had been killed by a cobra, and that this is what he said: the Pharaoh's serpent ate the bird because it led us to the hidden tomb. You must not disturb the tomb.
Really?
Well, of course, Carter laughed at him. He's not a superstitious guy. This guy's a scholar. There's nothing about superstition. He's like, get out of here, right? Done. The whole thing. Doesn't want to mess around with it. Which is what's funny is, like we said, what took them so long, because you got to be thinking, because I was reading the story, what happened? Why did it take from November 4th to November 26th before they even went in? Why? What the heck's going on with that whole deal?
Yeah.
Well, it's because Lord Carnarvon was in England, all right? So Carter had to send him a telegram, tell him, look, get over here, come over here. Of course, they had to inspect everything, go through it all. So they were going through all the motions. That's whenever all on the trip here, between the 4th and the 26th, is when all these rumors started. Because, like we said, this is the first one they've been found in a while. So the media starts playing up with this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
These rumors start circulating. And it was claimed that Carter, now this was it after the fact, that they say that Carter had found a tablet with a curse inscribed on it, and that he didn't want to alarm any of the people that worked for him. He didn't want to say anything. And this is what it was. It says this tablet. Now, of course, you can say it was allegedly or supposedly this was engraved on the exterior of King Tut's tomb also, but they also say some of it came from a tablet. It's debatable here, but it basically, everybody knows, especially if you saw the mummy, it's death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. That was what the idea. Well, then you got to imagine the media at the time grabs it, goes crazy with it, right? You're like, oh, especially in that area. Carter denied ever doing it. He denied ever finding the tablet. He denied any of that stuff. There's actually some documentation of some tablets or a curse that was found. So there's, of course, but there was actually some tablets or some records that indicate on other little sacred areas I had found. There's one that says, as for any man who shall destroy these, it is the god Thoth who shall destroy him. One says, as for anybody who shall enter this tomb in his impurity, I shall wring his neck as a bird's. And then one is, as for him who shall destroy this inscription, he shall not reach his home. He shall not embrace his children. He shall not see success. So the ones, those didn't come from King Tut. Those were in other areas and other inscriptions. You can't really find a lot based on that. Now, of course, like we said, the legend of the Pharaoh or whatever was that anybody who opened the tomb would suffer the wrath of the Pharaoh. Now, forever, and the reason they talked about not finding the mummies is they had forever been associated with magical powers. So that they knew that some would have been found, that they would actually be ground into powder and sold as mummy powder, and believed that it was good for healing. So people would drink them as teas. People, would use them basically as a medicine, medicinally.
That's crazy.
Now, the wild thing starts is this. This is when it got to snowballing. Lord Carnarvon died right after this, in the spring of 1923. The story goes that he was bitten on the cheek by a mosquito, and during his morning shaving rituals, another reason men shouldn't shave, that he had aggravated the mosquito bite, nicked it. May have got a little staph, a little infection, something came in there, but it was infected. He got sick, came down with a high fever and chills. There was a doctor sent to examine him. By the time the doctor examined him, all that stuff, this was in Cairo. Lord Carnarvon died. The story also goes that at the exact moment he died, the lights went out in Cairo. That's a strange part.
Yeah.
So now you can only imagine in Cairo what would have happened. People have reported on these curses. The locals believe in all of these curses, maybe rightly so. Carnarvon dies. There's already the stories about King Tut's tablet has been found. People are going crazy at this point. But that's not where it stops. Howard Carter actually gave a paperweight to a friend of his, Sir Bruce Ingham, and he gave it to him as a gift. Now, the paperweight was a mummified hand that was wearing a bracelet. Now, allegedly inscribed on this bracelet, it was said to say, "Cursed be he who moves my body."
Really?
Yes. Now, the story goes that this is that it was given to Ingham, that his house burned to the ground not long after he received this gift, and then he had it rebuilt, and then it was destroyed in a flood.
Really?
Yeah, so that's, not a death, but that's something pretty strange.
Yeah, that's a curse, man.
That's exactly pretty strange. Also, there was a railroad executive named George J. Gould I, and he actually was the executive over the Denver and the Rio Grande Western Railroads and the Western Pacific Railroad. And he had gone over to Egypt to visit the tomb, fascinated with these things. He died of pneumonia on May 16th of 1923. Now, mind you, they didn't open actual King Tut's tomb till February, right?
Right.
They had explored the rest, but they didn't really crack it open till February. So there's another one. George J. Gould, dead and gone. Also, Lord Carnarvon had a half-brother, Aubrey Nigel Henry Molyneux Herbert. That's a long name, right?
Yeah, right.
This guy was a big name. This guy was a somebody in the political world. He was a British diplomat. He was also an intelligence officer, and he actually was linked to and associated, I guess you could say, with, helped out a lot with Albanian independence, and they actually offered him the throne to Albania not once but twice. He turned it down. They believe that he actually suffered the wrath of King Tut simply because he had helped finance it also, that he had shelled out a little bit of that stuff to Lord Carnarvon. This is what happened. He had an infection in his gums and in his teeth, and somehow the doctors believed that it was messing with his vision, and he actually went blind. And the doctor said, "Hey, you know what? We can bring your vision back if we pull every tooth in your head." So they pulled his teeth. Died of blood poisoning 5 months after that. Then there was Hugh Evelyn White. Now, the story goes that Hugh Evelyn White killed himself due to this before the curse could get to him. Look, I looked into some of the stuff about Hugh White.
Not so much.
I couldn't really find it. Look, he was an archaeologist. He helped a lot during the excavation. Basically, he worked for Carter. Was like a go-between between Carter and his men. Hard worker, everything you can find. I mean, the guy knew what he was doing. Who really knows? There's even parts of it that said that he hung himself and that he wrote with his own blood. Now, this is what I found. "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear," and that he wrote it with his own blood. I couldn't find anything. It's just one of those, who the heck knows. Now, there was another American Egyptologist named Aaron Ember, and he was actually friends with a lot of these people that had passed away, and he was present when they opened the tomb right there with Lord Carnarvon. Now, he died in 1926 when his house burnt down. Now, they said that he could have got out of it, but he was trying to get a book out. He'd been working on a book, and the book was actually called The Egyptian Book of the Dead. He was writing a book about it whenever he died in a house fire.
Wow.
Now, Howard Carter had a secretary named Richard Bethel, and he was the first person right behind Carter to enter the tomb. He was there to jot down, to document,
right,
basically to chronicle everything that Carter was doing. He died in 1929. Now, that was 7 years later. Now, they say he died of respiratory failure at the age of 35. Now, it is, like I said, 7 years, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, there were some excavators, people that had died there. Like I said, there was a man named Archibald Reed, and he had x-rayed Tut before he'd even got to the Museum of Cairo. He was the man there doing the x-raying. He got sick the next day, died 3 days later, just after coming in contact with the body.
Wow.
James Henry Breasted. He worked with Carter when the tomb was opened. And this is another one of those allegedly stories. He was... Look, this is the one that he was supposed to be there whenever, they found the bird. Allegedly, he was with him. He was with Carter there, so it was kind of like he was the one backing up the story and all that. Who really knows? He died in 1935, but it was after coming back from a trip. Okay, from Egypt. So just natural causes, we don't really know. You dig around there, you really can't find a whole lot. But now we go back to Carter himself. Now, Carter himself died in 1939 of Hodgkin's disease at the age of 64. I tell y'all all this to put this out there. The press at the time attributed these deaths to the mummy's curse. And they say by 1935 that they had actually credited 21 victims to King Tut. Well, he was a director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and he actually did some calculations. And it was pretty funny, because what he come up with, that there was 22 people. Now, this fellow's name is Herbert Winlock. Now, he said there were 22 people present when the tomb was actually opened in 1922. Only 6 had died by 1934. Of the 22 people present at the opening of the sarcophagus in 1924, only 2 died in the following 10 years. Also, 10 people who were there when the mummy was unwrapped in 25, all of them survived until at least 1934. So I got to digging around, and in 2002, there's a fellow named Mark Nelson, and he is actually from the Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and he actually did a study on the curse of King Tut and says that it never really existed. And this is how he proved it. He took 44 Westerners in Egypt at the time the tomb was discovered. Yet again, and he says of those 25 of the group, people were potentially exposed to the curse either by being where they were, the breaking of this sacred seal in the tomb, or at the opening of the sarcophagus, or the opening of the coffins, or the unwrapping of the mummies. The average age of death of this entire group that was, let's air quote it, exposed to the curse was 70 years. The average survival rate for those not exposed was 75. They said, so given all that, it's not a significant change at all. So I got to looking into more, because I had found things while I read along about fungus or mold. Well, in 1999, Gotthard Kramer, a German microbiologist from the University of Leipzig, analyzed 40 mummies and identified several potentially dangerous mold spores on each. Now, mind you, they say mold is very tough, and like we've talked about, it can survive thousands of years in a dark, dry tomb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he said that most mold is completely harmless, but there's a few that can be toxic. Kramer himself thinks that when the tombs were first opened to the fresh air, that it blew around inside there, and these spores got blown up. And this is what he says. This is a quote. When spores enter the body through the nose, mouth, or eye mucous membranes, they can lead to organ failure or even death, particularly in individuals with weakened immune systems. The sad thing is, all the deaths that I told you that they tried to attribute to that, what does it sound like? It sounds like a mosquito bite that got cut, turned septic, the dude died, didn't have, none of the deaths seem anything other than natural, just human beings dying when
a house fire or committing suicide. Look, but that happens. I mean, that normally happens.
Pneumonia. You got sick from travel. I don't know. It's one of those things that you put it in the back of your mind when people bring up the fact of the curse of the pharaohs. You're like, oh, yeah. I remember all those people died from being there. And you hear, it's just the same thing I was. I remember thinking a lot of this stuff. And, I heard a little bit about a mold. I guess there was mold and these mummies killed all these people. When you really look into it, all the people that they attributed to it, you can't really find that whole number of them. The whole number of 22 people, that you can't find all 22. You find these same people.
Yeah.
So were they just local workers that maybe didn't get brought up? I don't know. But basically what I found, and I thought it was neat because we're celebrating the anniversary of it coming up, of the finding of King Tut, is the curse of the Pharaoh wasn't any more than what was said, probably told to keep people out, to try to keep them from...
Keep grave robbers out.
To try to keep a grave robber out.
Yeah. I do like the stories, but it doesn't look like it's real. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's real.
Well, that's really interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. Let's take a break, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with expanded perspectives. I hope everybody enjoyed those stories, especially the Pharaoh stuff. That's pretty neat. I always thought there was curse of these mummies. Maybe it was just horror movies that you see. You know, the curse.
It makes
of
a great story. Anything I think from the early 1900s and revolving around Egypt just draws everybody in instantly. You get drawn in, and I was the same way. I wanted it to be real, not for their sake, but I was thought, man, it'd make an awesome story. Not really.
Did you see any pharaohs or any mummies on your Halloween?
No, I did not. I did see some really interesting little costumes, though. Some good ones.
I would say I saw the most common outfit I saw was Darth Vader.
Really?
I mean, apparently Star Wars is really popular again.
I saw some interesting. I guess what is it? The Day of the Dead. You know, like the sugar skull paintings. What is it?
Oh, yeah.
Dios los Muertos or whatever, where they paint their faces like, what is it called? The Book of Life. Remember that movie, The Book of Life?
I've seen it.
Well, okay. I saw probably, no joke, I would say close to 50% of the people we saw. And I'm talking from kids to adults that came by with their children. The children would be painted. The adults would have their faces painted too. It's pretty neat.
Really?
And some of these were good. Like, it looks like they went and got them done.
The most unique costume I saw was a kid just had a square box and made it look like a Minecraft because, you know, it's like all blocks.
Minecraft Steve with the head and the sword.
Yeah,
and I saw one of those, yeah. The coolest one I saw was, I saw two. I saw one that was a group of kids that were stick men. They had black suits, and then they had the glow sticks, or like the glow, like you make the necklaces out of, the long ones, and they had them put in the arms and all that where they looked like glowing stick men.
That's pretty cool.
It was hilarious. And then I saw one of a baby that couldn't have been, no way it was a year old, and he was in a dinosaur outfit with the big tail and the whole thing. It was hilarious. It's like a baby triceratops. Was awesome.
I saw a little tiny baby, and he was just in a turkey outfit. Looked like a turkey.
That's funny.
It was pretty funny.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. And then the kids had a good time. A lot of candy. Everybody was safe. We had a good old time.
You got the beaties. Going to have to cut off a toe.
Yeah, right. They've been scarfing that candy down since they got it.
Losing it. Hey, I got some shout-outs real quick before we get out of here. Look.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's been writing us reviews on iTunes. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. So very much. And look, we have been doing an excellent job of keeping track with all of the stuff. We dropped the ball on this one. I'm not even sure where we stopped last time. So if I missed you, I'm sorry. I'm just going to pick it up in September. If I redo some of these, I'm sorry. Look, folks, Farmboy1529. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
User, San Diego 1. Thank you so much. Your boy, Jesse, thank you. Airy 2326. Thank you. Worm Diggity, thank you so much. Tremendous Dread, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Northern Jeep, holla, thank you very much. Big Head Beard, much love. Thank you so much for the reviews. Eddie, 124089. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Turtle 6364.
Am I not turtly enough for your turtle club?
Right? Thank you so much. Shout out, thank you to the Blue Demon.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Kenneth Elson, thank you so much. Cy Ad, thank you very, very much for that. DVS and 555555. Thank you. There's a bunch of fives in DVS. A shout out to the Twin Maker 22 and T-Bone Raymer. Thank you so very much. Dark Phoenix 291. Thanks for that. Auntie Likes History. It's a great name.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. WTW60. Thank you for that. Folk Hero 89. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Fredericks. That's a lot of S's. Thank you so much for that recent one. Everybody that's left a rating, everybody that's written a review, it means everything to us. We're going through the ones in the other countries. We'll get on to that on the next shows. Thank y'all so very, very much. It helps out. We're at 245 right now.
Yeah.
We're pushing.
Let's get 300 up there.
We're pushing. So please continue to put them in. It helps keep us up there. It helps keep everything noticed. It's just fun to see what everybody thinks. So thank y'all all so very, very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Cam, recently we just got some new webcams in, and we're going to be setting those up soon. So be looking for some new videos that are going to be coming out on YouTube and stuff.
We're going to try them on YouTube and on iTunes. I know we can put little ones on iTunes too, I think.
Yeah,
so
we're going to do some experimenting. So
we're going to do some messing
around.
Next
couple of weeks, you ought to be seeing something like that. Yeah. And I think we're going to start a monthly show that's actually a video once a month. And we're going to try to do like a look back over all the episodes that we did that month or the stories that we covered that month, and kind of give our thoughts on. Because lots of times we'll do an episode and then I'll get a bunch of emails, 50, 60 emails from people about something that we talked about on that show.
It's good information.
Or some of their answers to things. And we'd like to be able to go and discuss them. So it's kind of nice to do an episode and then go back and talk about what we learned since then.
Like a monthly wrap-up of everything that we've covered, yes.
I think so.
And the new information that's come in and things like that. Yeah, I think that'd be good.
And I think we're going to start a little segment on that where people can actually email us questions and we'll address them on that show.
Yeah, there you go.
That'll be pretty neat.
It'll be good times.
If you have any stories of your own, you can always email us, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can call the show, 817-945-3828. And don't forget, we have an elite show every Thursday. You can go to the website, expandedperspectives.com. I hope everybody has a good week. Don't work too hard. Cam, you got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, don't eat too much of that candy and get a bellyache. Everybody go easy on the candy now. We got it. Said you can eat it over the weekend, and we're all back at work. We kind of got to mind our own business, spread it out. And please, people, let's not start putting out Christmas decorations yet. Come on, man, that's aggravating. Everybody, let's just celebrate one at a time. Let's not get one foot ahead of the other one.
Well, for you elite members, we'll be speaking to you on Thursday. For everybody else, we'll talk to you next Monday.
Peace.